So, welcome. I'm trying a new thing, and that is I want to talk more about Dungeons and Dragons. And I thought I'd start us off with making a video about a character build that I am actually currently playing, and that I like to think of as an improved Arcane Trickster. And to see why this is an improved Arcane Trickster, it would make sense to me to look at the normal Arcane Trickster first, and see what defines it. And then we can take the aspects we like, throw out the aspects we don't like, and then see how we can build this character using completely standard D&D rules, no like homebrewing or third-party stuff, just official rules. This character could be used in Adventures League, and let's get into it. So as I said, let's first look at the normal Arcane Trickster. And the normal Arcane Trickster, of course, is a roguish archetype, thereby making the character a rogue. It gets spontaneous spellcasting. Its spellcasting ability is Intelligence. It uses the Wizard spell list, and as the subclass features, it gets two different features that improve Mage Hand in some way. It gets a feature called Magical Ambush, which basically allows you to ambush people to give them disadvantage on their saving throws, and an ability called Spell Thief, which you can once per day block a spell, and then you know that spell for the following 8 hours. Now to analyze those features, it being a rogue is very core to it, of course, so our build is going to be mostly rogue. It being a spontaneous spellcaster, first of all, seems kind of a part of the build. You don't want to change into a prepared caster or anything. And also, that's just a personal thing though, I generally do prefer spontaneous casters. Now here's what bugs me. Spellcasting ability, Intelligence. So of course a rogue usually is mainly a dexterity based character, but also you're not just sneaking and hitting things and wanting to have a high armor class. You also want to maybe deceive people or persuade them, or in general use charisma based skills. So you can't bump up all of your ability scores that high, so I would prefer if the ability score we used for spellcasting was Charisma. The Wizard spell list, it's very extensive, and with you not having that many spell slots, you probably don't want to go too much into aggressive spells anyways. So it's cool for what it does. There's really no reason to hate on it. It's also not necessarily the greatest thing ever or anything, so I rated this one as neutral, and then we got all of the archetype class features. All of those aren't bad, but they are also not integral to the build, so I rate those as good but not great. Now, here I have the class table for the Arcane Trickster as well as for my build, and as you can see, I took 5 levels in Bard, and then multi-class into Rogue, and then basically went with Rogue the whole way, at level 3 of Rogue, which is level 8 of the total build, taking Swashbuckler. There is multiple ways you can pull this general idea off, but before I go too much into that, let's backpedal slightly for a moment and talk about choices like race and ability scores. Now, as I already mentioned, this build is based on dexterity and charisma, so I like to pick half-elf for this, and of course you're getting a +2 to charisma and +1 to 2 ability scores of your choice, as well as some other neat racial traits. And for ability scores, I'm going to assume a standard set array of 15, 14, 13, 12, 10, 8. And your stats, taking into account racial adjustments, should be 16s in Charisma and Dexterity, as those are your key scores, 14 in Constitution, to bump up your hit points as well as con saves, 12 in Wisdom, to bump up your Perception, Insight, and Wisdom saves, a 10 in Intelligence, and an 8 in Strength, because you really don't need Strength for anything. That being said, if your DM cares about carrying capacity, you will need Strength, so you might want to put a 10 or 12 in there, but again, that depends on your DM really, because I don't think you really need Strength. Of course, at the end of the day, that's also just suggestions, and you can build your character however you like, but that's just my 2 cents. So, back to the class choices. I picked 5 levels of Bard, and I picked College of Lore. Now, what College of Lore does, it gives us Expertise, which is already a rogue class feature, so that kind of works into the theme of also you're getting Cutting Word as your second use of your Bardic Inspiration, which is good because you might be 2-weapon fighting a lot for your build, so your bonus action as well as your free hand aren't going to be used that much for spellcasting and the like. So Cutting Word using your reaction as opposed to Bardic Inspiration using a bonus action, which can already be taken up by an offhand attack or a spell, just is nice for action economy, as well as of course potentially helpful to save you or your allies from attacks. Now, another strength of this build is of course getting Bardic Inspiration in the first place. You're having a way stronger spell progression. Basically, when it comes to spell slots, the Arcane Trickster catches up at level 13 to what you have starting at level 5. Of course, at the very end it does get a bit stronger from the pure number of spells that you can cast per day, but you're overall a more versatile character. Also, not taking Arcane Trickster of course means that you can take another roguish archetype, which in this build is the Swashbuckler, which is printed in Zenith's Guide to Everything, as well as the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. And that allows you to actually compensate for another weakness of this build, and that is that you have slightly less sneak attack dice. You have 2 less dice at the end at level 20, and for every odd level, I believe, you have 3 less dice than you normally would. This is compensated by your level 3 Swashbuckler features, which again in this build is level 8, of Fancy Footwork, which allows you to take less damage by avoiding some attacks of opportunity, and giving you more maneuverability without having to worry about attacks of opportunity. And even more importantly, Rakish Audacity, which allows you to sneak attack in more situations. So on average, I would think that being able to sneak attack more often will compensate for doing slightly less damage when sneak attacking. There is the option of taking a 6th level in Bard to get the College of Lore's Magical Secrets that allows you to take some spells that are from a different class as opposed to your Bard spell list, and of course also get an additional 3rd level spell. If you do that, I would suggest you do that after level 8, because then your key rogue abilities, including your Swashbuckler abilities, are set in stone, and you can actually effectively use your sneak attack already. That being said, of course, level 9 has an ability score improvement / feat, which means you might want to wait till after that as well. Especially taking into account that your level 20 ability, while cool, isn't particularly necessary for this build. Of course, if you want this to feel more like a rogue from level 1, you do have the option to not start with Bard, in which case you would take at least 3 levels of Rogue first before you start sprinkling in your Bard levels. I would suggest to take the Bard levels consecutively, at least the first 5, because at level 5 you get both your Bardic Inspiration bumped up to a D8, as well as your Font of Inspiration, which just means that you can use your Bardic Inspiration a number of times equal to your Charisma modifier per short or long rest, as opposed to previous levels where it's only per long rest. So you don't actually have to worry about wasting your Bardic Inspiration / Cutting Word for the day. So, to close this, I would like to take my list from the beginning with some added stuff on top and compare it to the Improved Arcane Trickster. So I added on top that you're losing Elusive and Stroke of Luck, which are your rogue abilities that you're getting after level 15. You're overall losing 1 ability score improvement, which is probably the worst thing about this, and you're losing 2d6 of sneak attack. You still are a rogue, you still are a spontaneous spellcaster, you do now use Charisma instead of Intelligence, you use the Bard spell list instead of the Wizard spell list, which for direct combat prowess is probably weaker, but also has some nice healing spells like Healing Word, for example, that you wouldn't be able to get as a wizard. You get your Bardic Inspiration and, by extent, Cutting Word, which can be really useful. You're getting Song of Rest and Jack of All Trades, which are not as key to the character build, just like some of the other class features that you're losing, but they're still nice to have, so they kind of compensate for losing some other minor stuff. You got 1 extra expertise because you're actually getting it 3 times now instead of 2, thanks to getting it from both classes. And of course you get the option to take a roguish archetype instead of the Arcane Trickster to benefit from its features. Again, I picked the Swashbuckler, you could pick any, and this would definitely work. So let me know what you thought of this character build. Tell me how you like my presentation. Do you want me to go more in depth about stuff like where to put your ability score improvements, which feats you might want to take, which spells you might want to take, or did I maybe go already too in depth? Like, just, in general, the format, I haven't done this before, so I would really be curious to know what you think about this. And, besides leaving constructive criticism, you can of course also leave a like or dislike if it was horrible. And, maybe consider subscribing to the channel for more D&D videos, which might be a more central focus of this channel going forward. And as always, I still have to figure out a better way to end videos.